We need to talk. It's been a rough ride, from a culture bent on burning itself down to attacks from within. But by the grace of God, we've been given a moment, a chance to make lasting changes. We can rebuild what's been torn down, but we have to build with what will last, the gospel of the kingdom. This April, let's sit down. Let's talk about what matters. And together, we'll build something that lasts. ReformCon 2025. Tickets are limited. Lord willing, we'll see you in Tucson.
Non-rockabotus must stop. I don't want to rock the boat. I want to sink it.
Are you going to bark all day, little doggy, or are you going to bite?
We're being delusional. I love you, Jeff.
Delusional, yeah. Delusional is okay in your worldview. I'm an animal. You don't chastise chickens for being delusional. You don't chastise pigs for being delusional. So you calling me delusional using your worldview is perfectly okay. It doesn't really hurt. She hung up on me.
What?
Desperate times call for faithful men and not for careful men. The careful men come later and write the biographies of the faithful men, lauding them for their courage.
Really hurt.
Oops. Sorry.
Go into all the world and make disciples. Not go into the world and make buddies. Not to make brosifs.
Right.
Don't go into the world and make homies.
Right.
Disciples.
I got a bit of a jiggle neck. That's a joke, Pastor.
When we have the real message of truth, we cannot let somebody say they're speaking truth when they're not.
Take an amazing journey to a place that will blow your mind and move your heart so you will never be the same again.
You shall do no wrong in judgment, in measures of length or weight or quantity. You shall have just balances, just weights, a just I never know how to say that word. And a just hin. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, and you shall observe all my statutes and all my rules and do them. I am the Lord. That is Leviticus chapter 19, verses 35 through 37. What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Apologia Radio. Sorry for the mess up at the beginning. Trying to do too many things at once. I am flying solo today, other than my guest, who I will introduce here in a minute. Pastor Jeff was trying to get back today from Ohio, but got stuck again for weather. That's like the third or fourth time he's gotten stuck over there. He's been doing some work for EAM this week, and Kentucky and Ohio. We should have bills in there maybe today, actually. So Pastor Zach Conover couldn't be on today either, so I'm just flying solo, but excited for this show. I'm going to get into here really quickly. First, I want to thank our sponsors, Iron Layer. You can go to ironlayer.com. We love those guys, the NAD patches. And of course, we've been talking about the new glutathione patches they have. You can put a Apologia in the coupon code there and get some sweet discounts. Love those guys. We love the product. And I'll mention Bill Rapier here at the beginning, since he's a good friend of one of my guests. It's Bill's fault that I got introduced to him to begin with, but Amtech Blades, love Bill, love his product. You see those sweet battle axes there, which I don't think Brad has one yet. We got to get on that. I got to get Bill on that. Anyways, you can go to amtechblades.com, put Apology in the coupon code, get 5% off your order, and he will match 5% to end abortion now to help us save babies. So let's just get right into it. I have returning, I'll introduce Brad first since I already mentioned his name, but Captain Brad Geary, Navy SEAL, awesome brother, become an amazing friend, and I'm grateful to have him back on. So what's up, Brad? Welcome back.
Dude, good to see you. Good to be back. Really appreciate you, man.
Yeah, likewise. And then, of course, his attorney and our attorney for Stand With The Warriors, who's back on for like the gazillionth time, Davis Younts, and every time he comes back, his beard is better.
Very jealous.
Hey, brother. So let's we'll start in chronological order here. First, You know what? I'm just gonna play this. Well, if you guys have seen with Brad on before, he got introduced to Stand with Warriors. We've been representing him with the whole mess he got falsely accused of when he was commander at Buds, and we've had him a couple of times to talk about that, and just been helping to support him and pray for him. And I'm going to play this clip here real quick and just introduce it. So this was what was the date on that? That would have been, what was that date?
December 12th or 13th, right around there.
Yep, that's correct. So I got a call from Davis, who broke the news to me, and I immediately picked the phone, called Brad, and I was like, "Are you kidding me?" And he's like, "How did you hear?" Davis. So let me play this just real quick. We'll play a section. So Sean Ryan's reading a letter that Brad received. I'll play it.
Go full screen.
Oh, sorry.
From Chief of Navy Personnel to Captain Bradley Geary, Commander, Navy Region Southwest, Commander, Naval Special Warfare Command. Notification of administrative show cause, dismissal. 1. Following the show cause decision in reference A, you elected to appear before a board of inquiry. Since initiating this process and through legal counsel, you raised numerous matters to Commander, Navy Region Southwest, which resulted in my decision to grant a continuance to afford you more time for preparation to ensure the additional information you requested would be available in sufficient time prior to the BOI. 2. Since granting your last continuance, I have reviewed your case again and after careful consideration, determined that you are no longer required to show cause for retention in accordance with reference B. Case dismissed. So I talked to...
Man, how awesome is that? So you were on Sean Ryan back in like the summer, right? It was like June, July, maybe somewhere in there.
So I'm trying to remember the exact date. Yeah, somewhere around. Actually, I think I recorded before that. It just took.
Oh, that's right.
A good like 10 weeks for them to edit it. We sat there for probably 8.5 hours, and they edited that down to about 6, and so it took some time to get that dialed in.
That's right. Yeah, that was a good episode. I think that might be the longest episode he's had, which is saying a lot because he's got some long ones.
Not a call I wanted to have for sure.
Great episode though, if you guys want to check that out. But yeah, so just man, amazing news. I've been excited to talk about this for a minute. We finally got an opportunity to do so. But yeah, so tell us about that. What's going on there, and we'll bring Davis on for the legal side of it.
Sure, man. It's so good. I mean, God gets all the glory for this one. Clearly, he showed us each step to take along the way. So someone said recently, "Man, Brad, it was amazing how you masterfully strategized this whole thing like a chessboard from day one and set these pieces in motion." I had to laugh out loud, saying, "No, it was really like walking through a fog where I had no idea where we were going, but every single step we took was done prayerfully." And in consideration of, are we making this decision based from our pain or from an attempt to glorify God and take a step out of faith and based upon the principles that we believe in? And we knew that as long as we did that, wherever each step took us, we could sleep well at night and know that, hey, we made those steps deliberately and not haphazardly and not out of rash human emotions. And so it was good, and God was faithful, and he walked us through that almost 3-year process there.
Wow.
So I was out on the front lawn on a separate call, and I got a phone call that morning. Had no idea it was coming, and said it was the legal office at our TICOM, and I was like, "I gotta hang up, dude. I think I'm in trouble again. I'm getting a call from Bags." That was my first instinct, and they said, "Hey, case has been dismissed. It's for all intents and purposes as if it never happened."
Wow.
Words he used, and they said, "You're free to retire." So at this point, we've now submitted for our retirement as of a few weeks ago, and we're starting that process. Lots of medical appointments involved in that. Turns out almost 30 years of active duty service, 25 of those as Navy SEAL isn't so good on the body. So we're now crossing those T's, dotting those I's, and figuring out all the problems that I've kind of just dealt with over the last couple decades. But wow, we're in a great place. It's funny. It's like taking off a 1,000-pound rucksack, but those muscles are still tense and tight after almost 3 years of just that strain. And so it took us the whole Christmas season to really focus on breathing and decompressing and just being thankful. And so we're in a great place right now as a family. We're spending this season in gratitude because God's good, man. He's good.
Yeah. Amen. Praise the Lord. Well, Davis, what are your thoughts on that, just from the legal perspective?
Man, there's so much to unpack about all of this. What I will say from my perspective is God laid the plans for everything that happened in this case a long time ago, right before you or I met Brad, and it's just fascinating how all that came together. The right people came together at the right time, Sean Ryan, and just the way everything built from just a willingness to try to jump in and do what we believed was the right thing. So, this is not unprecedented what happened to Brad as far as this BOI getting dismissed, but just so everybody can understand, I mean, this was an attempt by the Navy to blame Brad for a death, to label him as something other than an honorable service member, and to take away his retirement after close to 30 years of service. Yeah. I mean, that's what was at stake. Short of a court-martial, this is administratively the worst thing they could do to an officer. So this is a career, this is a pension, this is a reputation, this is honor that was at stake. That's how serious this was. So it's hard to describe, unless you've gone through it, what it is like for someone to experience the relief of knowing, okay, this is going away now, and I'm going to be able to finish out my career. I'm going to be able to retire honorably, and I'm going to be able to, hang up my hat and walk into the next plans that God has for me without this stain hanging over my reputation. So Amen. Just an amazing blessing from God, the way this all worked out.
Brad, has there been any pushback from the mother? I know that it was kind of causing a lot of the issues for you early on.
Yeah, she's upset. She went vocal with a few different news outlets, to include, I think Good Morning America had her on recently, and she's frustrated. And like we've discussed it almost every time I've gone public, rightly so.
Sure.
Because she was never given the full truth. And I do hope that she and the family get some closure here soon. We just hit, in fact, I think it was last week, February 4th was the 3-year anniversary of when Kyle died. Family, we deliberately sat together and prayed for her and the whole Mullen family that day. And we really do pray for closure for them and for reconciliation one day. Would be such a God glorifying thing to see. Yeah, she has my phone number. I still hope for the day where we've established comms again and can repair what's been broken.
Yeah, that's such a good point. I hadn't even thought about just praying for her, and like you said, like, you've been vindicated, but she's still hasn't got any real answers from the death of her son, and now the Navy's just kind of saying, like, trying to dismiss it, brush it under the rug like nothing happened. So yeah, that's got to be rough for sure. So do you guys, I'll ask you both, and this will kind of bring us into the other part of this conversation, but if Trump doesn't get elected, do you think this happens? Do you think that the charges are dropped?
Davis is shaking his head. I think it was multivariable. In the end, you can't hide from the facts and the evidence that we had on our side.
Sure. Mm-hmm. Sure.
So, I mean, when Jason and I, Jason Warren, my original attorney, before we linked up with Davis, who joined the team, and then of course everyone's tracking Tim Parlatore and Mark Jessup, another fantastic Navy JAG that was assigned to our case as well. We had quite the legal team by the end, but everyone that looked at the evidence kept telling us, hey, victory is absolutely going to happen because we can't run from these facts and evidence we have. They're slam dunk nuggets of info that people fed us over the 3-year battle. It's just a matter of how long and what it looks like. So I think victory would have looked differently had President Trump not been elected, but it was going to happen either way. It was just a matter of time and how it manifested.
Yeah. Davis, why were you shaking your head?
Well, I was shaking my head because I don't think the BOI would have been dismissed if it was not for the election of Trump. I mean, I 100% agree with Brad. This was a case to win. The facts were very, very clear. You can't change them. The reality was very, very clear. This was political and motivated by things we can get into later as to how it even got this far. So I don't think the outcome would have been different, but I think that it wouldn't have been dismissed like this if it wasn't for a change in leadership. So it was an opportunity, quite frankly, it was an opportunity for the Navy to step away and do the right thing when President Trump was elected.
Yeah.
The right thing was there for them to do all along. And we were going to, I believe we were going to reach this conclusion regardless, but it was a huge blessing that it happened this way. For many, many reasons.
So for people like me, can you explain what a BOI is?
Yeah. So it's what we call the administrative separation process for an officer in the Navy. So it's a board of inquiry. That's what they call it. So think of it, I mean, the only way to understand it outside of the military is to think of it like a trial. It is very similar to a trial. It's an administrative process. So when someone in the military has more than 6 years of service they can't simply be kicked out without going before a board of inquiry or an administrative separation board. So it feels a lot like a trial. You have 3 service members that act as the jury. And then there's a legal advisor. So it's slightly different than a criminal trial because jail is not on the table. It's an administrative process. The burden of proof is actually lower, but discovery, all the aspects that you think of a criminal trial are part of that process.
So go ahead. I'm sorry.
Sorry, I was going to say it's worth bringing up, and Davis and Jason both addressed this at points in the Sean Ryan interview. This is part of what I learned through this 3-year process. We're asking for reform because for name's sake, what the Navy will tell you is this administrative boards are non-punitive in nature. And they'll say that all the time. It's non-punitive, it's administrative. But if you're talking about a process that can give you another than honorable discharge and demote you in retirement, taking your retirement benefits, that is absolutely punitive. Talk to any soldier, sailor, or airman who's dealing with an other than honorable discharge, it changes the course of your life. That is a punitive thing, all administrative. And that's part of the problem here too, as Davis mentioned here, is it's shy of a legal court, but then that means it's not bound by the same legal standards for evidentiary collection and proof. And so it's all based upon a board's feelings on whether you did something that's worth this or not. And so in a sense, what ends up happening, and I've talked to hundreds of people that have gone now through the similar thing as me, what ends up happening is functionally due process rights are violated because they can use shoddy investigations, they can use hearsay, they can use opinions, and they add all these things to there. Sometimes not based on maliciousness, sometimes it's just incompetence, sometimes it's incompetence with malice, but either way it gets into this board, and now confirmation bias can set in, and a sailor, or soldier, or airman is set at a significant disadvantage standing before this board arguing their case. All for things that I think in the end disproportionately punish honorable service member. This is your reward for serving your nation. So we're going to put you through the ringer and call it non-punitive and call you to the table and question your years of active duty service because of what? Some anonymous allegation out there? It's really unjust. And I think it's created a system that has disincentivized a lot of people from being interested in serving. My case was not an anomaly. This was a symptom of a larger problem within the Department of Defense, and I think our soldiers, sailors, and airmen are seeing that problem and are starting to vote with their feet. I think these things are absolutely tied to our retention and recruitment challenges. Sure. Thankfully, we're kind of getting fixed, as we saw the news break the other day for 2025 recruiting goals for the Army. I think people are seeing we're righting the ship, but either way, this entire administrative process needs to be overhauled.
So I didn't see that recruitment numbers are up then, I'm assuming.
Yeah, for 2025, they already hit their requirement or something. I'm speaking, I may be misquoting it, but Secretary Hegseth put that out on a social media tweet the other day, and pretty impressive that we're a month and a half into 2025 track already.
Well, waiting feels good.
So the Army's having to expand basic training and their capacity of basic training for all the recruits coming in. They set a 15-year record. I think it was a month. For the month of January, but it's a 15-year record in recruiting.
Wow.
So Yeah. So just to piggyback on some of what Brad was talking about as far as this administrative process, just to kind of understand it in terms that will frustrate people listening, but that makes sense, is what has happened when you take away, common sense, fundamental notions of justice, when you take away biblical principles, what you have is a military justice system where there are cases that everyone knows there is not enough evidence to support a criminal conviction, right? So if it went in front of a judge, there's no way it would even get that far. But there is this avenue, this administrative avenue within the military process where allegations that wouldn't hold up in any other setting can be pushed forward to this BOI, this Board of Inquiry, this administrative separation process, and you're left with really unequal justice because the quality of the process and what happens to that board is dependent on, the three officers that they pick as jurors. That's the best way to understand them for this setting. So I've done, hundreds of these boards across all the branches of the service, and inevitably the outcome really is determined by the willingness of those board members to do the right thing and to push back against their leadership because, Brad used the term confirmation bias. Absolutely the problem. If the admiral is saying, if the general is saying, hey, we're taking this to a board for you to consider kicking this person out and taking away, everything they've earned through their service, there's this pressure on these board members often to reach that outcome, right? And that's the problem. So we go in there into this process and we have to say, no, the Constitution still applies. Presumption of innocence is still supposed to apply. The Navy, the Air Force, the Army still has to prove their case. And that can be a very, very difficult challenge. So, we've had tremendous success in some of those. I've had tremendous success in those. And there are others where you just sit there and shake your head because the outcome felt predetermined. So that's why we need reform. And all of the things that are happening in this administration, whether it's in the DOD or just through other parts of the federal government, is this bureaucratic entanglement has gotten so out of control that there really is bureaucratic tyranny. Yeah. And it's not just in the military, it's through all of these administrative processes where at best, to the extent you are provided due process, it's due process light. And so all of these administrative rules can be used to destroy your life, to take away your livelihood, your reputation, all of these things, sometimes your property, and you don't have the full anticipated concept of what we think of as constitutional protection. So at best in these proceedings, it's due process light, which is a very difficult avenue to navigate. And you are often at the whims of these bureaucrats. And people forget the military is filled with bureaucratic functionaries at many levels of leadership. And that's where the reform is, because if that's the mindset, if people in the military are more concerned about their career and how they move up in the bureaucracy, that is a very dangerous system to be a part of.
But you can't handle the truth, Davis. That's probably your favorite movie, isn't it?
No, it's not.
Well,
it's not.
So
they love that stuff.
So, obviously, how long were you a JAG for? I know you did 20 years, right? Were you a JAG the whole time?
Right. Yeah. 11 years active duty and then 9 guard and reserve.
So you've seen the, worst of the worst. And so, talking about reforming all this, without putting you on the spot, how much have you seen situations where you're like, this is awful? Besides Brad, and obviously Brad is vindicated, but how many times have you seen guys where you're like, they weren't vindicated and they suffered and they got, charged wrongly?
Yeah. So, I started out my career in the Air Force as a prosecutor, and I was a prosecutor at two different installations. But my career as a defense attorney, I never wanted to be a defense attorney. I never wanted to be that person. I always thought I would be a prosecutor, wear the white hat. And then I was assigned to the Air Force Academy, and the Air Force really didn't give me a choice. I had to become a defense attorney. And what I saw there was the beginning of problems seeping into the system that were there. They were already there, but it was the outpouring of it, which is a really outcome-based military justice system and not a truth or justice based system. And what I mean by that is this whole idea. This is the problem. We use terms like, progressive, woke, Marxist, DEI. What is the problem with all of that? The problem with all of it is we create these systems that are designed to protect people and create protected classes. And what that does is divorce us from the truth. So what am I saying here? To be very blunt, we're talking about situations where if someone complains that they are a victim of anything, of being told something that made them sad, of any kind of a crime in the military system, the system just had this ideology seep in that we can never blame the victim. And if someone's a victim of something, some type of oppression, whatever it is, we're not going to hold them accountable for their own actions. So what you had is this wild idea, things like if you are in the military and you are in trouble yourself, you've done something wrong that could get you in trouble, but you raise your hand and say, no, I was the victim of a sexual assault or sexual harassment, just as an example. We now have these safe to report policies that make it so you won't be held accountable for your own actions. So the problem is we've gone from a system where we need to protect the people who are serving our country and ensure they are protected to one where we reward a lack of accountability and people can manipulate and abuse the system. So the kind of things I see all the time, not like Brad's case, but the kind of things I see all the time are, a spouse cheats on their significant other, they get caught, and they use the military system to gain an advantage in divorce and custody proceedings by bringing false allegations that no one will ever question the truth of. So even if it goes to trial and there's an acquittal, and there's not a conviction because they were innocent and they were falsely accused, they've used the military system, the charging process, to gain an upper hand in divorce and custody proceedings. So I can tell you, just in the last 2 years, I've represented 5 or 6 Christian men who were falsely accused of horrific things by a spouse who was having an affair. Like that sounds hyperbole. People don't believe it. That's the kind of thing we see because the military has become so politically correct that we have allowed this to seep in, and then we've divorced this from accountability. And I don't want to put Brad on the spot in saying this, but one of the things I have been seeing a lot more of is a concern that the most effective thing we're doing when we're training leaders in the military over the last 4 years in particular is not in leadership, but in risk mitigation. The problem is too many leaders are prioritizing their own career as what they're trying to mitigate the risk of losing. And that's a huge, huge problem. So, I'm incredibly excited about some of the things we're seeing and the efforts at change that I see coming forward, but there's a lot of work to be done.
Yeah. Dan, thank you for that. I appreciate that. So just real briefly, I'll ask you, Davis, there's people that are watching that may not actually know Brad's case. Could you just give us like a quick 1 or 2 minute synopsis of what happened and so people are kind of brought up to speed?
Yeah, so the best way to understand it is just to understand the position that Brad was in as leading the BUDS training, so leading the schoolhouse where SEAL training was occurring. And one of the things that was happening was a concern that Captain Geary was aware of the use of performance-enhancing drugs, so steroids. So there were some candidates who were willing to engage in steroid use to try to gain an advantage and try to get through the rigors of the program. The problem is when you're doing that, and these are illegal substances, you're getting dangerous substances that you have no guarantee what they are, right? So, I mean, these are things coming in from Pakistan. Who knows what they are? Who knows what they're tainted with? An extremely dangerous, foolish thing to do, even if it matters to you to get through this training so much. So one of the things that happened was Captain Geary was aware of this, trying to put a stop to it, trying to deal with it, got very bad legal advice from the Navy legal command, who told him things like he couldn't search vehicles, even though they knew that's where steroids were being hidden and where things were being kept, because that was the only place the candidates could hide them. So what you have in this situation is a young man who tragically was, all the evidence points to the fact that he was relying on steroids to achieve success, to get through Hell Week in the training program. And all of the evidence points, including what was found in his vehicle, points to the fact that his use of that, his uncontrolled use of that over time, resulted in his death. And the Navy attempted to avoid blaming the victim. And this is the language that was used by Navy leadership. We're not going to blame the victim. And so what they did is look for a scapegoat. So they tried to blame Brad and the chief medical officer for the death of this SEAL candidate after Hell Week, when all of the evidence, scientific evidence, medical evidence, and otherwise points to the use of performance-enhancing drugs as the contributing factor to his death.
Yeah. Well, thank you, brother. And again, praise the Lord. We don't have to worry about that anymore. But so that'll bring me into the other half of this conversation. Then, you know, if you guys haven't been listening or following us, you know, we started with Stand with Warriors in fall of 21. And, I mean, just, it's been incredible, just to watch God work all that, bring it all together, how he did, you know, it was literally just, I think that day we had about 30 active SEALs that are just brothers, Christians that were just trying to be faithful and do the right thing and you know, honor their Savior and, you know, also honor their Constitution and the oath that they took. And so, you know, we met with them. We're like, yeah, we have no choice but to help these guys. And so just to see it go from that, you know, and then obviously, you know, with the situation with Brad, and then, you know, Davis and I have talked a lot where we're like, this is much bigger than just, you know, the vax. Like, this is much bigger. Like, there's something else going on. And so to see where we're at now, you know, obviously with Trump getting elected, you know, we have at least 4 years to maybe get some stuff done. Praise God. You know, it's like a breath of fresh air. Like I said earlier, like winning feels good. So I'm just curious what you guys think. I'm going to ask both of you this, but just seeing the corruption you've both seen on the different levels, you know, you both talked about reform. Like, do you kind of feel like maybe I'll ask you, Brad, I'll ask you this first. Do you kind of feel like maybe you're like the tip of the spear, maybe to some degree, where it's like, we can take this situation, we've now been given an opportunity to fix this, like you said, to reform things. I wonder if you kind of feel like that, or am I just making that up?
I think, I'm trying to think how to phrase about it, but I think we're at a very unique time and place, unlike we've seen, at least in the entire almost 30 years I've been serving in the military, where there's a lot of momentum for change, and it's change, I think, in the right direction. It's not like a universal endorsement of everything that's going on necessarily, but at the same time, I'm very encouraged by what I'm seeing. And everyone I talk to at those deck plate levels, at those troop levels, they're just frothing at the mouth for the opportunity to singularly focus on lethality as a military, and on back to the Reaganism of peace through strength, and being a force for good across the globe. The 20th and 21st century have seen global peace and prosperity unlike ever before in the history of the world that we know it, and that is largely because America came out of World War II as this dominant force for good, the shining light on a hill. And I feel like this is a return to that, and that is exciting a lot of people that I talk to, and they're just looking forward to what these 4 years will bring. As officers, you know, we swear oaths to the Constitution. That's deliberate. It's deliberate that we do not swear an oath as officers to an institution or to a person. We swear our oath to the Constitution, and we serve the office of the President of the United States. Everyone I know is very excited about this Commander-in-Chief, and then his nomination, the confirmation of Secretary Hegseth, and where that's going to take the military. And I think there's a lot of goodness to come for America, and as goes America, so goes the world.
Amen. Amen. Davis, what are your thoughts on that question?
Yeah, so I have to put it into context, and the context is, you know, I joined the Air Force as a JAG, you know, not a trigger puller, but I did it because 9/11 happened when I was in law school, and I really felt that was, you know, that was the time. This is what I had. This is the gift that God had given me to bring into the war fight. So I mean, I joined to deploy. I joined to, protect our nation during that time frame. And the difficult thing for me, and I know Brad can relate to this, but my entire career was spent post 9/11. So understand that last time I was on duty under orders wearing a uniform, I was at the Air Force JAG School as a reservist when the disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan happened. So understand, I mean, I deployed. All I did was support, the efforts in Iraq and Afghanistan throughout my career, and to see like I watched the statue of Saddam fall in Baghdad at the JAG school in my JAG training, right? I literally watched that golden statue fall over, and then I'm at the JAG school again, watching this disaster caused by, lack of clear leadership, weak leadership, and just not understanding anything about what it's like to actually be in that combat situation. So I say that's kind of how I frame my military career. And I was forced out of the military. I was in non-compliance. My religious accommodations to the COVID vaccine personally were denied. I was not in compliance. I was told I had violated a lawful order. I was waiting to get kicked out, 6 months shy of retirement, and it took an injunction in federal court to get me to that 20-year retirement. So everything I say about what's happening now is sort of couched in those two frameworks. So for me, what I am excited about with Secretary Hegseth is two pieces. One, this is a godly man who is in a good church, who has a good pastor, has good people around him who are discipling him and have been over the last 3 years. Just to have a fellow brother in Christ, not perfect, like none of us are, and yet he is doing everything he can to serve God and honor God through what he's doing. Number one, but number two, he is a war fighter. He was not a paper pusher like I was in the Air Force. He was actually a war fighter who's been in combat, who's led troops in combat, who understands what that's like. And that's what we really need in the military. So just the emphasis on the war fighter and understanding, returning to a place where the Secretary of Defense understands what it's like to eat MREs, to understands what it's like to sleep in a tent, to understand what it's like to clean a weapon because it's filled with sand. Like those little things of what that is like are so important because we're so far removed from that as a military. So I hope we cut the fat. I hope we get very lean and mean, and we focus on getting the best tools possible into the hands of our war fighters. That's what we need to do. That's what I'm excited about, because that's what I see coming. And I think that intent has been made very, very clear.
Oh, yeah. Amen to that. And we actually have a Stand With Warriors board meeting next Monday, so we're excited about what the future may bring with that. But so I talked about this just briefly a couple weeks ago. We kind of just did it in passing at the end. But I was watching the Trump's inauguration, and I just put on the TV. We were just watching all throughout the day, and I wanted my kids to be able to watch and see history and learn some stuff. And I I'll be 44 next week. I don't ever remember watching an inauguration speech and being so fired up. Like, it was just one thing after another. I was like, oh my goodness, this is crazy and amazing. And I like winning. And so I think I texted both of you. I got to the part. I'm going to play the part here where Trump vindicates our friends. Both of you, includes both of you. But I was screaming. I was so excited. Here, I'm going to go ahead and play this real quick. Sorry, let me try it again. Didn't have the volume up. Here we go.
This week, I will reinstate any service members who were unjustly expelled from our military for objecting to the COVID vaccine mandate with full back pay. And I will sign an order to stop our warriors from being subjected to radical political theories and social experiments while on duty. It's going to end immediately. our armed forces will be freed to focus on their sole mission, defeating America's enemies.
I'll just stop it there. Oh man, I literally was like, "Let's go!" And I'm like punching the wall. I was like, "I need a wall to run through right now." I was so pumped. So before I talk anymore, Davis, you're on the screen right now, so I'll just get your how you were feeling when you saw that, and then I'll have Brad speak as well.
Yeah, I'll focus on the COVID piece because that's how we met, right?
Yep.
So I'll just focus on that. I mean, what was so encouraging to me is the fact that the president was willing to say unjust, right? Was willing to acknowledge that what happened to so many people, what was threatened to so many people, was an injustice, and it really was. And there's a lot of reasons why we've talked about that, but it was, an intentional effort to ignore the constitutional rights and the religious freedoms of service members. And then this whole idea of forcing an experimental product on service members was driven by something other than justice. It was driven by something other than an intent to take care of our service members. So, we went from being in a room with individuals who were willing, Navy SEALs who were willing to be court-martials and were told they were going to be thrown in the brig. Yeah. And then who went through, a lot of those guys that we worked with that are our friends went through, those guys that stayed in, went through 2 years of hell. There were suicides because of the way they were being treated for 2 years. And to hear the president say unjust was, it's hard to put into words how important that was and what it means to so many people who simply wanted to honor God and do the right thing during an extremely difficult and challenging time.
Yeah, and to be clear, again, obviously, Davis, you were representing a lot of these guys, but you were going through it yourself. It wasn't like you were...
That's right.
It wasn't like this was in a vacuum. Like, you were going through the same process as these guys while defending them.
That's right. 6 months shy of retirement, it took a federal judge saying no to the Air Force, saying it is apparent facially what you're doing is illegal, to stop the Air Force from kicking me out without even a BOI. The Air Force was kicking reservists out no matter how much time you had in without even any due process during this. The Coast Guard was doing the same thing. So yeah, just to hear that language of unjust was incredibly powerful, and just grateful to God for that moment.
Yeah, well,
absolutely.
I'll come back to you in a second because I want to talk about what this means moving forward. So Brad, what were you thinking when you watched it? I think you texted me that you were choking up a little bit.
Just a little bit. I don't cry often, but there may have been a couple of tears of joy there. It was just such vindication for so many of my teammates and people I don't even know who suffered through that. Like you just alluded to, it's interesting. Suicide is a very passionate part of my life, encountering it and helping that just tragedy across the Department of Defense with our active duty and our veterans. And we got a brief about a year ago by our force suicide prevention lead, who said the majority of our suicidal ideations in the teams, at least in Naval Special Warfare, come from those under investigation and or leaving the Navy. Whether you're guilt or innocent, doesn't matter. Guilty or innocent doesn't matter. The simple fact of being under an investigation creates such isolation and emotional damage that increases the number of suicidal ideations. As I'm listening to her, the stats, and she started listening to all the psychology behind the why there, I was like, oh, that's interesting. I fit into both those categories. And I can absolutely relate to those feelings after spending 2+ decades in a community that values you based upon your contributions to the team. Over time, that can warp into your own, where you find your self-worth. And when all of a sudden that very community, whether it's NSW or the Navy, due to COVID or anything else, starting to sideline you, and not just that, the thing that bothered me too was the bullying. It was coercive. people even using our faith against us in many ways. Like, oh, Jesus says, love your neighbor. So you clearly don't love your neighbor if you're not willing to get this vaccine. That's when, like, to be honest, when the vaccine first popped and it was optional, my first response was like, yay, science. Like, this is fantastic. Go America. We came up with something new, and this is exciting, and this is a reason to celebrate. And almost immediately you started hearing these coercive narratives. That's what kind of got the hair on the back of my neck standing up. Like, well, if this is in fact what you're saying it is, you shouldn't need to coerce us. You shouldn't need to emotionally bully people. And like I talked about on the Sean Ryan show, we were seeing real time being forced to train through the pandemic that there really wasn't much to be afraid of as long as you had a young, healthy population. We now know that all these comorbidities were likely causing the fatalities. But generally for healthy young Americans, there wasn't much to worry about. So we're seeing that in real time while the narrative was kind of pressing us that, hey, this is the greatest national security risk we've ever faced. And all the soft branches that were training through COVID were looking around like, I don't think so. So to see that narrative being used to coerce was just, it was crippling. It was crippling. And to see people's lives and decades of invested time into serving our nation and the Constitution just being thrown away like trash because they stood up for a principle and a value that they believed in was really, it was just soul crushing to so many people. So when the president said that, and yes, Davis, like you said, when he said this was unjust, he was 100% accurate. And it is vindication for so many. It doesn't repair the damage done, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Hard part in these things, there's no real justice, and I don't know if you could ever really get true justice this side of heaven, but at least there's victory, at least there's vindication, and people can take solace in that.
Yeah, amen, brother. Okay, so Davis, just moving forward, then obviously, in many ways, the last 4 years have just kind of been a training exercise, I think, for Stay With the Warriors. So we got a lot of work ahead of us here.
Yes.
You do, I should say. I'm just standing by cheering. I'm a cheerleader, but and sign things. But we have guys that have kind of been all over the board on the spectrum of effects of this, right? So we got guys that. Somebody was just in here earlier that, I don't know if I can say his name, but he was just in here, said hi. He was one of the original dudes. He got out, was in SEALs Beat Biden. We got guys that got out, had to pay back their signing bonuses. I know there's a whole nother court case there. We got guys that are still in that either they were told either sign an extension or we're re-rating you, which means they would have got sent to a ship, and they're like, all right, I'll sign the extension. So we got guys all over the place. And when Trump said that, I had guys texting me like, are we really going to get back pay? Or, like asking questions. I was like, I don't know. We'll find out. Let's ask Davis. So there's a lot of questions, a lot of work to do. So I'll just let you run with it. Like, what do you think, what do you think the forecast is now for these guys and just moving forward in general?
Yeah, so I think we have to define categories real quickly and just kind of explain that. And then it'll, I think, help speak to what I think relief looks like moving forward. So when we look at the guys impacted by COVID, there's this number that's talked about a lot of 8,600 people. Those were the people that were involuntarily discharged specifically because they did not get the COVID vaccine. So that's the group of people that we were trying to help at the beginning. And, there were at one point 250,000 when you look at all the service components, active, guard, and reserve. There were 250,000 people who were not vaccinated once the deadline hit. Yeah. So that 8,600 were the people that none of us could react fast enough to save. We were able to slow that number down. But there's that number. Those are the people, if they want to return to service, it looks like they're going to have a pretty clear path. They're easy to identify. The Marine Corps has already sent out an email and text messages to not a bunch, but several of my clients, people that were kicked out. We've already helped a couple people get honorable discharges already that had less than honorable discharges as a result of that. So I think the path for those folks who want the opportunity to go back in and serve again, when we talk about that 8,600, I think that's pretty clear. The unanswered question is the other two categories. So there are approximately 95,000 people who were forced out. of the military because of what happened during COVID. That's a number that is, larger than I think most people want to recognize. But the reality is there's 95,000. So those are individuals who wanted to re-enlist and continue serving, who could not. I've got clients with like 15, 16 years in that reached the end of their contract and they were not allowed to re-enlist unless they got the vaccine, so they left. There are others that retired early. There were others who simply took it as an opportunity to retire medically and get out. And so there are, at least the best number I can come up with is 95,000 who fall into that category of their discharge paperwork doesn't necessarily reflect the fact that they were kicked out of over COVID, but the reason they were not allowed to continue to serve is because they were unvaccinated. Those are the first two categories. The third category is all of those people, and some of them I'm talking about, who stayed in and their career was negatively impacted. So they received, a reprimand, a letter of censure. They were not allowed to be promoted. They were removed, fired from command positions over these things. So when we look at relief, the first category I think is fairly straightforward. I think that the relief is going to be easy for them. The second category, Trump addressed in the executive order. If you look at the executive order, he says those people will have that left because of COVID will have the opportunity to make an affirmation, to provide a statement and request the opportunity to come back in and serve. The final category, the active duty folks that had their career damaged by this, that's going to be, I think, the hardest category, and where it's going to take a long time to work through that, because what does it look like? And Brad can speak to this, but if you're in the zone to take a command position, a leadership position, and you've screened for command, and 2 years go by, and you're not put in that position, your career, you've been sidelined. Your career is off track, and it's really, really hard to make that up. And the problem is, thousands and thousands of really good people were not able to move our military in the direction it should be. So that's where the work is going to come in, is dealing with those people that are harder to identify but still need a lot of help.
Yeah. I mean, we know a guy, one of my closest friends through all this, who was about to screen for Green Team and was a shoo-in, and got stuck on the shelf for 2 years, and now he's just like, he's one of the guys that had to extend his contract, and when that's up, he's out, and so like, people don't think about how, this affects our military readiness, and how we're, losing some of our best warriors because of this junk. I mean, we know guys too that were on in DevGru and just sat there for 2 years, twiddling their thumbs. One thing that was really cool that Trump also said, and this I feel like has kind of got maybe lost in some of the vaccination talk, but if you remember, Davis, when we met with those guys, everyone in that room had just gone through all the DEI junk. Do you remember? So here we're meeting about the vax stuff, and then they're like, we just went through all this, and they said it was a joke, they just signed something, whatever. And I remember sitting there thinking, like, are you serious? Like, I couldn't believe, and so I love the fact that Trump also was like, no more of that. That's one thing we've talked about with Stand With Warriors too, is like fighting some of that, and now for the next 4 years, Lord willing, we won't have to, but that was something we were prepared to do, was defend guys that might be, facing some trouble for not complying with all that nonsense.
Can I give some examples?
Please.
I have so many examples.
Please.
I won't give too many, but I mean, I have two people I can think of right now, active duty service members who are, I would call some of just the best, the most apparent victims of DEI. One posted a meme that was labeled extremist, and as a result, it was turned over by the military to the FBI. The FBI came and visited this 20-year-old kid who just posted a meme, didn't even fully understand what it meant, and the FBI picked him up. I have another who made a comment about women serving in combat, and how, based on his Christian beliefs, he did not believe that was appropriate. He was reported as an extremist and had to sit down with the FBI. That's just two. That doesn't even deal with the Idaho case that Stand With Warriors is involved in, that's just resulted in a filing in federal court. where a gentleman out there was fired because of his religious beliefs, his belief in traditional marriage and a biblical view of human sexuality, got him fired from a command position. And that case is ongoing. It's been filed in federal court in Idaho. So, I mean, those are just three examples of the kind of a fight that's there. And the problem is, again, so many people were kicked out, labeled extremists and kicked out of the military for things that you can't believe unless you put it in the context of other things we've seen going in society. Unless you understand the spiritual battle that's happening, you can't put you can't frame it properly, because it is amazing what's happened to our military. So absolutely, recruiting was down, retention was down, and now that you have the president commenting on DEI and Hegseth moving forward on that, what people outside of the military don't understand is we felt, I certainly did. I mean, Brad was in the special operations community, so it was better. But in just, the main Air Force, I didn't feel comfortable saying, I didn't feel comfortable saying things like that the primary role of the Air Force is to break things and kill people. That's what I was taught in officer training. That's our job, right? Our job is to do that. And I didn't feel comfortable saying things like that anymore, even at the JAG schoolhouse, because of the way that might be perceived. That's how rotten the culture was when you look at so many units, especially when you're removed from the front lines and you're removed from the special operations community.
Man. Well, Brad, I haven't had this conversation with you, and I know you're still in, so I don't want to get you in trouble, but is there anything you like to, any comments along that conversation you might have, or thoughts?
Yeah, I'm glad you said that too, because it occurred to me a minute ago. I never started this off with I am still active duty, and everything I say in this episode, my personal view alone. That should be, I mean, everyone should assume that at this point, but I feel like I should
just get
a
shirt that says that, then you don't have to say it.
I know, right? Or just tattooed on my forehead. Yeah, I think Davis is right. We were somewhat insulated from that within the SOCOM enterprise, at least from my personal experience. We were, because we still very much focused on lethality, but there were definitely a lot of things that made us start scratching our heads. And you started talking about extremism, and I mean, Secretary Hegseth's book talks about how he was labeled an extremist and pulled off of detail because of a tattoo.
That's right.
And this narrative started taking form that there was this accusation that, there's a problem in the ranks of military of racial extremism. And I'm looking around like, I don't think so. And we'd have meetings and talk with our teammates. And of course, you ask anyone in the service, if you ever experienced racism, yeah, generally speaking, people are going to say, yes, I had a moment or two through my life because I ran into a horrible human being. But none of us were talking about seeing anything systemic. And so we're scratching our heads as this was getting forced down everyone's throats. I mean, generally speaking, at every command I served at, it was an incredible atmosphere, a positive culture where everyone was unified in one goal, becoming more lethal and serving our nation. And these things were a distraction when all of a sudden you start wondering, well, is there a problem and maybe I didn't see it? And so you're starting to have these conversations and forced conversations and forced training, and we're all looking around like, this seems like a waste of time. We used to say at Buds, the cold Pacific Ocean does not discriminate based on what you look like, your background, your religion, or whatever. She is cold to everybody. And I used to joke with the candidates too, you may have been raised a racist, but the Pacific Ocean is to make you so cold that you're going to want to hug the person next to you no matter what they look like, because you're going to want to share that body warmth. And everyone would giggle and look uncomfortable, and we'd tell them go hit the surf. And a few weeks later, I'd ask them, did it work? Are you hugging anyone you can for body warmth? And they all nodded. We said, great. The ocean doesn't discriminate, neither do we. If you meet our standard, if you put out and you show yourself to be a reliable teammate, focused on our mission, then that's really all that matters. We shouldn't need to address intersectionality. We shouldn't need to address where you came from. Other than on a human level, obviously we should care as leaders and seek people's backgrounds to understand and care for them. They're entrusted to our care and our authorities. But as an organization, as an entity, hey man, we're unified in our focus toward the mission. And as long as you're contributing there, I don't care what religion you prescribe to. I don't care what your skin color looks like. I don't care whether you're male or female. Let's go. we're on the same team and we're moving down the road.
So yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, because I'm just thinking timeline wise, those guys would have gone through all that probably spring or summer of 21. So you were at Buds then. So did you? And again, I don't. If you can't answer anything, don't just tell me. But I mean, were they trying to force any of that stuff into Buds, or you think, or maybe that was stuff they were trying to force in after the fact, after they made it through training?
Tough to say. I think Naval Special Warfare held the line in a lot of ways, but you could see it creeping in subtle ways. You could see it creeping in. You could feel the pressure to start buckling, and thankfully, I've got stories I'll probably be able to tell more once I'm officially out. But I know of a few leaders that are still in our formation that held the line. One of them was incredibly inspirational. He's now an admiral. He was my commodore at one point. And he held the line on someone who was trying to pressure him. The institution was trying to pressure him to bend a rule to accommodate a situation that was very DEI focused that we wouldn't have done otherwise. And he basically said, "Hey, I'm not doing it, and this may cost me my career, but we stand on principles and we don't bend our standard for anyone, because if we bend it for someone, we have to bend it for everybody."
Yeah.
If we do that, we dilute the value of the Seal and Swick brands. And I'm not going to do that. And I'm in a position where it's my authority to say no. And he did. It was incredibly inspirational. So we've had people in there that have held the line for the most part, which is refreshing. It was refreshing to be able to work with people like that and inspiring.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you, man. Well, we're just about out of time here. So we'll, any closing thoughts either of you have? And then we'll just wrap the show up. And we are going to have an after show for everyone that's all access. We'll bring these guys back on for a few minutes. But Davis, Brad, any closing thoughts?
Man, I just appreciate you guys, and God is good. He's sovereign. He never leaves his throne.
Yeah.
And what man means for evil, God uses for good. Mm-hmm. And I did that over the last 3 years. And so, however this goes, we just have total trust and faith in Him and in His goodness. I was crazy. One of the worship songs that resonated with us over this last year was "Defender." I think Rita Springer sings. So good. And there's just one line where she speaks in that song where it says, "Your way is so much better." I may be misquoting it, but it's something about that. Your way is so much better than mine. And I was singing it the other day, and it occurred to me, oh man, we're on the backside of this season of suffering. And yes, Lord, your way is so much better. Look where it's taken us. Look what it taught us. Look at this next season to come. But what I realized was so many times when it even didn't make sense to say that, we were still singing it, and that wasn't an appeal, it was a declaration. So we're just so thankful that God is sovereign and we can trust in Him to be good and to be just. And His way is better even when it doesn't make sense. We're riding a great wave right now where I feel like there's somewhat of a revival coming across the nation. That won't always be the case, but God is sovereign. He's got us in His hands. So just thankful to be a part of His plan.
Well, I appreciate that, and I'll turn over to here, Brad, Davis in a second. Sorry, that's my timer. Just knowing you, Brad. The amount of pain and suffering that you've seen, the deaths you've seen, close friends dying, is I don't know that I've ever known anybody that's seen as much as you, to be honest. And it's encouraging to sit here and hear you say that, with this trial you've gone through, just with the trials you've gone through over the last 30 years is pretty remarkable and encouraging. So thank you for that. Davis, closing thoughts?
Yeah, I think I would say that throughout all of this, what God has continued to teach me is that there is no substitute for your personal relationship with Christ, but your engagement in a local church and nurturing friendships and community in Christ. Because none of this, not Brad's story, not anything that's happened, comes from anything other than that. And you and I didn't even know each other, Luke. And but it was a friendship I formed with another Christian brother, an attorney, and it was an instant, knowing very quickly for men that didn't know each other and all of us together to come together in a room to pray and just know, okay, God did this. Now we need to just follow on in God's will and try to do what it is He's asking us to do. So my encouragement to anyone out there, military, outside the military, or otherwise, is don't neglect that walk with Christ. Don't neglect your local church, and build community with Christian brothers and sisters, so that when things happen that are not expected, that create a crisis, you have that. Take care of yourself and your family first, but build those relationships, because that's what it takes, and that's how God intended us to live.
Amen. And that attorney's name is Bradley Pierce, who was one of the founders of Heritage Defense, who we happen to partner with. So if you homeschool, please go to heritagedefense.org and sign up. It's really, really not expensive at all, and make sure you're protected against any three-letter agencies. And you can put Apologia in the coupon code and get your first month free. Bradley's a busy man. He was in North Dakota yesterday for one of our bills. Got a hearing yesterday in North Dakota. We'll be back out there shortly to have a rally when it goes to the floor. But it's fun. I'll end here. So it's funny. Dave was talking about when we met. It was I didn't even know you were going to be there. I had no idea. And so in typical Apologia fashion, we're like late to the meeting. And it's because it was a lot further than we thought it was. But we walk in, and here's Davis just rocking and rolling, like he's got the board and he's doing all. And we're like, who is this guy? I had no idea. Man, but dude, it was awesome because you just were on it. And you were just taking charge, and we ended up just being there just to encourage and stuff. But yeah, that was how I met Davis. So lastly, you can go to shop.apologia studios and get some of these tracks, some of this pre-sip coffee, some of this swag. We got some sweet shirts and stuff, and we of course appreciate your support. All accessors, we love you guys, appreciate you, and can't do this without you. So we'll go ahead. I don't know what the next few months are going to be crazy with all of our bills and stuff going on. So I don't even know what we're doing next week. There is a show we've been planning for a while. If we can get everyone here at the same time. So we might do that next week, but thank you again for everyone. Brad, Davis, thank you, brothers. And again, all accessors will be at the after show here in a few minutes. God bless.